Good afternoon and a warm welcome to today's panel discussion of Diálogo Político with the topic Current Developments in the Middle East and Latin America's Perspective. My name is Jonathan Neu. I'm working for the Konrad Adenauer Foundation here in Montevideo. And Diálogo Político is a multimedia platform run by the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Each week we have on Diálogo Político a wide range of political analysis on the current political situation in Latin America and around the world. So if you don't already know Diálogo Político, I invite you to visit our website to explore a little bit our content. Today also marks a special occasion for us because it's the first time we're hosting this panel format in English. Usually we had it in Spanish. Our today's topic is current developments in the Middle East and Latin America's perspective. We want to take a closer look at the recent rise in tensions in the region, particularly the 12-day confrontation between Iran and Israel, which marked a new chapter in this long conflict. The key question we will explore is whether we are witnessing a fundamental transformation in the region's political landscape. At the same time, we would like to understand a little bit better the implications for Latin America. How are Latin America countries positioning themselves and what role can or should they play? I'm very glad that I'm not alone in tackling these complex questions, and I'm especially pleased to be joined today by my dear colleague, Dr. Marcel Serr. He is political advisor for the Middle East and North Africa at the headquarters of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Berlin. I'm also happy that Dr. Isaac Nashrum from the University of Ottawa is here today. He is a specialist in communication with a focus on Israel, and he's also a regular author to Diálogo Político. And last, but certainly not least, we have here today with us Dr. Sergio Castaño. He is political analyst, expert on Iran, and currently teaching at the International University of La Rioja. Thanks all of you for being with us today. I'm really looking forward for the conversation. But the idea is that we use the first 30 minutes to have a short introduction in the topic. And the second part of this hour, we usually use for discussion. So if you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat, put your questions on YouTube, on X, and then we will try to answer as many as possible. So first, I would like to ask Marcel Serr, you could please give us a brief overview about the current panorama. The floor is yours, Marcel.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for this kind invitation. Many greetings from Berlin in Germany. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm excited to be here today to join you. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I will give you a quick recap of the so-called 12-day war. I think President Trump coined that term. And I'll share thoughts on the war, the impact on Israel and on the region. So let's dive into it. Israel started Operation Rising Lion against Iran on June 13th. Jerusalem's goals were pretty straightforward, I'd say. Damage Iran's nuclear project and weaken its ballistic missile program. In recent years, the Iranian regime has been devoted to the destruction of Israel. The regime's leadership has been openly, constantly and explicitly calling for the destruction of Israel. But you don't have to take my word for it. Here's a quote from the so-called supreme leader of Iran from May 2025. Start quote, definitely the Zionist regime is the source of corruption, war and rifts. The Zionist regime is a lethal, dangerous, cancerous tumor and should be certainly eradicated, and it will be, end of quote. So these aren't just empty words. Over the years, Iran has spent a lot of money and effort to arm terrorist groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and Yemen's Houthis, who all have attacked Israel. In addition, the Iranian regime has been investing also a lot of resources into a nuclear weapons program and also developed advanced ballistic missiles and drones. So, but these activities have been going on for a couple of years. So this brings up the question, why did Israel act at that specific moment in June? Well, it looks like Israel felt that the threat from Iran was imminent, so it had to take action before it was too late. It's been estimated that Iran could produce enough weapons-grade uranium for up to 9 nukes in a matter of weeks. On top of that, Israel got a window of opportunity, so to say, thanks to 3 major factors. Number one, Hezbollah, Iran's proxy in Lebanon, had been largely neutralized militarily during a campaign from September to November 2024. Factor number 2, when Israel hit back with, when Iran hit back with a huge missile attack in October after Israel had taken out Hezbollah's leadership, Israel went on the offensive itself and took out a big chunk of Iran's air defenses. And factor number 3, when the pro-Iranian Assad regime in Syria fell shortly after, the Israeli Air Force took the opportunity to destroy Syrian military assets, including air defenses, and they opened up kind of an airway to Iran by that. Plus, talks between Iran and the US, which President Trump started in April 2025, had hit a wall in June. Israel's strike began right after the 60-day deadline by President Trump had expired. So the initial Israeli attack on Israel was nothing but impressive. The Israeli Air Force, Israeli forces on the ground in Iran destroyed Iranian air defense batteries and surface-to-surface missiles. At the same time, some very precise assassinations were carried out against high-ranking officials in the military and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. This caused major chaos in the Iranian armed forces and prevented the Iranians from a full-scale response. During the war, Israel launched between Iran, launched several hundred missiles. Israel destroyed 800 to 1,000 ballistic missiles on the ground and also about 200 launchers. Still, as I mentioned, Iran launched almost 600 missiles at Israel. Most of the Iranian missiles ended up in open areas. Israel and the US intercepted the rest with around 200 missiles interceptors. The costs of these interceptors went up to 1.5 billion US dollars, so quite a costly operation. Overall, the air defense system intercepted successfully about 86% of the targeted missiles. Nevertheless, 36 Iranian missiles hit built environments and also 6 military sites in Israel. Also, of the 1,000 drones Iran sent up, only 1 hit Israel in Bet Shean in Israel's north. The rest either crashed or were shut down. As a result of the missile attacks, 29 Israelis have been killed, more than 3,500 more have been injured. 240 buildings in Israel were affected, and this impacted more than 13,000 Israelis. Eventually, as we all know, the US joined in the fighting. In the early morning of June 22nd, 7 B-2 bombers dropped 12 bunker-busting bombs on the Fordo site and 2 more on Natanz. Also, the US launched cruise missiles at Isfahan, possibly from a submarine. Then a day later, June 23rd, Iran attacked a US base in Qatar. As retaliation. Qatar had been apparently informed in advance. It closed its airspace and not much happened. Trump announced a ceasefire between Iran and Israel on the next day. So in less than 2 weeks, the Israeli Defense Forces carried out, well, the most remote and complex operation in Israel's history. It did so pretty successfully. However, Israel didn't completely destroy or defeat Iran, but it managed to establish a new balance of deterrence, I'd say. Nevertheless, the big question is still up in the air. How much has the strike affected Iran's nuclear program? It's likely that the two enrichment facilities at Natanz and Fordo were damaged quite a bit. However, there are theories, rumors that about 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% could have been taken off the sites before the attacks. But apart from these, let's say, technical issues, it's even harder to say if the war will make the Iranian regime rush or dash to acquire a nuclear bomb, or if they decide to abandon the effort, at least for now. Also, there is the ballistic missile threat to consider. Iran still has the ability to launch missiles at Israel. The IDF estimates that the Iranians have about 100 launchers and several hundred long-range missiles. So this is something to keep in mind as well. Before I come to an end, I want to zoom out a little and briefly talk about the regional consequences, at least a bit. I start with Lebanon. Hezbollah has been losing ground since the war between Israel and Iran. The terrorist group was basically built up over the years as a deterrent to prevent Israel from attacking Iran. But it didn't fire a shot during the war. So this underlines its current weakness, I'd say. In Syria, the Assad regime fell pretty quickly at the end of 2024. The new al-Shara regime is eager to consolidate its power. So working out a deal with Israel could help Syria to stop Iran from entrenching again in the country. However, I think full normalization is unlikely, but maybe a more modest framework might be possible. Also, it's important to see how the Gulf states react to Israel's military display. They are basically looking at two options, I'd say. They could either balance against Israel by arming or forging tighter alliances, or they could jump on the bandwagon and normalize relations with Israel under an umbrella by US economic and military engagement. My feeling is that it's not yet decided. It's also closely related to developments in Gaza. So I'm coming to an end now. The emerging Middle East is still a mixed bag for Israel. The Iran campaign has opened doors for Jerusalem to reimagine a regional role, but it also shows the paradox, I'd say, of Israel's military power. So even though the Arab states recognize Israel's military strength, they also feel threatened by it and also feel a threat to stability. As so often in its history, the major challenge for Israel seems to be how it can turn the tremendous success in the battlefield to diplomatic progress. And I stop here. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcel, for this short overview. Really interesting, because I already see some someone asking in the chat when is the point to start questions. You can always put your question directly in the chat, and we will take note of them, and then I can later put your question into the debate. But first, I would like to ask Sergio, maybe you could give us a short overview about the situation of the Iranian regime. Like, for me, as a non-expert, it seems that the Iran regime appears quite weak to me. So what do you think about this?
Okay, thank you very much first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. It's always a pleasure for me to collaborate with Diálogo, Político, or Political Dialogue. And yes, we have to understand what is happening in Iran and the reality of Iran. I have the opportunity to visit Iran some years ago, and I was in contact with people there. I understood how people live in Iran, and the image that the regime conveyed to international community and tried to reinforce in media through this TV or Hispan TV in Latin America, the difference of power initiative of Iran in order to transmit this consolidated regime based on religion, where everyone living in Iran is supporting the theocratic leaders, is not the truth. The reality in Iran is totally different. And we may go back to the revolution in 1979. This revolution was supported by religious groups, obviously, but at the same time by leftist political parties. They collaborated during the revolution, and they expected to initiate a transformation in Iran according to their priorities, according to their ideologies. But after finishing the revolution, the religious leaders took the control of the country and established the Islamic Republic of Iran. But Iran is a plural country where there are religious people, but there are an important secular society. So this image of unity transmitted by the government is not the reality, but we accept this image in Western countries. And if you ask to someone in Europe or in America about Iran, normally the answer is the same. They say, Iran is a religious country where everyone is following the rules imposed by the government, or not specifically by the government, by the religious leaders. But this is not the truth. At the same time, Iran tried to show to the world an image of a strong country, a military power, a hegemonic power in the Middle East. But the recent attacks by Israel and by the United States show the real vulnerability of the Iranian regime. So it was a facade or an image transmitted to the rest of the world, but the real situation in Iran is totally different. And we have to analyze now what are the elements that make the Iranian regime vulnerable. What were the pillars used by the government or by the regime to consolidate its position? The first aspect that was fundamental was the ideological control. No one can think against the regime. The society has to accept the rules, and even when the majority of the people, or maybe not the majority because the situation is different depending on the cities, is not the same society in Tehran or in Isfahan than in other smaller cities in Iran, but a vast segment of society is against the regime. They are totally contrary to the restrictions imposed by the regime, by the Ayatollah Khamenei. If someone wants to drink alcohol in Iran, there are private parties and private clubs where people drink alcohol. The average of alcoholism in Iran are highest young people drinking alcohol, but alcohol is prohibited by the regime. So this is the reality. A dual society, on the one hand, the religious leaders imposing restrictions, controlling society. On the other hand, the real society, secular society, or a large part of secular society trying to escape from this restriction. So ideological control was one of the pillars of the regime. The second pillar was the regional reach, to show this image of regional power, military power, competing directly to Saudi Arabia, and also challenging the rest of the world with its nuclear program. And related to this nuclear program, we had to highlight the deterrent capacity. The nuclear program deterred other countries to invade or to attack Iraq. But everything changed in the last 2 years when Israel decided to attack directly Iran. Not only with these direct attacks, with weapons impacting directly to Iran, but we have to remember the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, in Tehran during the funeral of Ismail Raisi, the former president of Iran. He pass away in a helicopter accident in strange circumstances. We cannot link this kill with an accident from any other country, but it could be possible. But what is now critical is that Israel was able to kill Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. The reaction of the regime was direct, determined, telling that they will respond Israel in the same way, but at the end, after more than a year, Iran wasn't able to react and to respond at the same level to Israel. So this is a clear vulnerability of the regime. After analyzing the general situation of Iran, it is important to delve into the internal situation. What is the political structure of Iran? What are the challenges for the government, and what could be the future of Iran? Firstly, we have to understand the political structure, how the Islamic Republic of Iran is made up. We have two areas of power. On the one hand, the religious leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and on the other hand, the president and the political Republican or the Republican structure. Who rules in Iran, the president or the Ayatollah? At the end, the parliament, the president make decisions, but the final decision is in hand of the Ayatollah and in hand of the Islamic Republic, Revolutionary Guard Corps. So elections and the different Republican structures doesn't have any sense when the leaders, the religious leaders, the Ayatollah, the supreme leader of the revolution, decide to initiate a total different initiative. So maybe in some cases, or from other countries, someone could consider that Iran has a parliamentary system, they celebrate elections, but at the end, the result of these elections don't impact on the political decisions and the important guidelines getting or establishing the politics of the country. So this hybrid system, theocratic rule and Republicans element, but at the end, the power in hands of the supreme leader. More aspect to highlight how the supreme leader, how the religious leaders were able to control society. They use propaganda, they use media. There are not private media in Iran. The religious leaders control everything within the country, and especially the different television channels inside the country and outside, because Iran promotes channels in the Arab world, in Arabic, in English for the rest of the world, in Spanish for Latin America and for Spain, and all the information conveyed by these television channels are controlled by the leaders of the revolution. So at the end, the propaganda is fundamental. If you visit Iran, you can see the image of the Ayatollah Khamenei in everywhere, in bus stations, at the airport, everywhere you can see the image, the flag of the country. So the propaganda is intense, and the internal control of society is permanent. So there is a morality police controlling how women dress. There are various movements protecting freedom, protecting women, and I remember the demonstrations initiated after the death of Mahsa Amini in 2020 and 22, when people went to the streets, not only in Iran, in other countries, supporting Mahsa Amini, and it was a symptom that the regime could control the internal situation of the country. But after 3 years, the regime is still ruling on everything and controlling the country. So this social problem is a fact in Iran. Society is challenging the regime, and the social problems are linked to the economic collapse. Iran is suffering an important economic crisis provoked by the sanctions from the European Union, from the United States, but also by internal inflation and the difficulties to develop economy. So it affects directly the society, the daily life of people is affected by all the economic situation. And when people don't have the basic necessities or can afford to a normal life, they react against the regime. So if some years ago people could accept the present situation of Iran and the rule of Ayatollahs, of the supreme leaders, today, every day, there are more people contesting the supremacy and contesting the current system in Iran. Yes.
Maybe we can leave some part also to the questions, because I know there's a lot of things to elaborate. It's a really complex topic, but maybe just to, because I have the difficult task to be the timekeeper. I first would like to give a short moment to Isaac, and then we can have a discussion and can once again discuss a little bit further the Iran question, because I see I have already many questions in the chat and will would like to have some time. I hope this is okay with you.
Okay.
Isaac, like the question I have to you, maybe you could explain a little bit more to us how all this affects Latin America and how the Latin American countries are positioning themselves.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. And I'm glad to present after Marcel and Sergio, because I think the two, they made a very good an introduction to the subject from a regional point of view and also from the internal politics of Iran. And the question about Latin America is depending on the countries and depending who you ask. I will say that Iran has been trying to forge alliances with different countries in Latin America. I think the most prominent one has been the regime of Maduro in Venezuela, but also they try, and they have been approaching other governments like in Bolivia and Nicaragua and even Brazil. And I think because of the changes that we have seen in the last days, certainly I think some of these countries will reevaluate the kind of relations that they want to develop with Iran. Maybe for some of them will be easier to kind of take some distance, thinking about Bolivia, for example. But maybe for some others, it won't be that easy, because these relations with Iran have a direct impact on their economies, and even the ability to reinforce their military capabilities. I'm thinking particularly about Venezuela. Venezuela, I mean, in a very paradoxical way, imports gasoline from Iran. I mean, as you know, Venezuela has huge reserves of oil, but one of the things that this regime accomplished was the destruction of the national oil company PDVSA. And now Venezuela relies on importing gasoline for the internal market. And one of the providers is Iran. Then it won't be that easy for Venezuela to take some distance from Iran. The other question is the military question. We are not 100% sure, but we have seen developments in the internal industry military industry in Venezuela, where there has been some kind of transfer of knowledge from Iran to the armed force in Venezuela to build drones. And we have seen the development of drones in Venezuela. They have been showing this technology, displaying this technology. And we can assume that this technology, the drones that are manufactured, assembled in Venezuela, they somewhat are either they have parts coming from Iran, or they there is, as I said, some kind of knowledge transfer from Iran to Venezuela to develop these weapons. And I think, as I mentioned, for Venezuela, it won't be that easy to cut these ties. But maybe other countries like Brazil, for example, and that would depend particularly on the economic, commercial relations with the US. But I think, for example, Brazil, even if Lula is having a very strong rhetoric against the tariffs that the government of Trump imposed to Brazil, I think Lula will be maybe more careful in the way his government manages the relations with Iran. Certainly, you have other governments that certainly are not in favor of developing these relations with Iran. On the contrary, you have clearly governments in the region, as the case of Milei in Argentina, that they are very, let's say, pro-US and pro-Israel. And because of things that happened in the past in Argentina, they have a strong position against the Islamic Republic of Iran. We should remember that first in 92, with the bombing of the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, and 2 years after, in 1994, with the bombing of the Jewish Association, AMIA, also in Buenos Aires, there is the big question, what was the involvement of the Iran regime, either directly or using proxies such as Hezbollah in these two acts of terrorism. And I think that's maybe one of the key questions that we should ask now, not only in relation to Latin America, but also in relation to the kind of reaction that we can expect from the Iranian regime. As Sergio explained, I mean, militarily, they have been, they try to show some kind of power, against Israel, but at the end, somewhat Iran, because of the loss of the proxies, particularly Hezbollah and the Assad regime in Syria, is not that effective militarily. They rely a lot on the proxies. And the question now is what kind of actions we can expect from Iran. As Marcel said, are they going to continue developing their nuclear program? Are they going to insist in developing also the range missiles? Or will they be open to some kind of negotiation, particularly with the US? But what happens if they cannot reach any kind of agreement? If they insist to continue developing their nuclear capabilities, if they insist to continue having this ballistic missile, what would be the response of the regime? Can we expect a resurgence of terrorism outside the region, for example? Can Iran promote these kind of attacks as the regime, the Islamic Republic, did in the past? We don't know exactly. But there is one aspect that I would like to briefly develop here, which is the soft power of Iran. As Sergio explained, I mean, they have a huge propaganda apparatus, not only internally, but externally. And one of the gains, I mean, certainly we have seen a lot of trouble for Iran, a lot of vulnerabilities in terms of their military capabilities, in terms of their own nuclear program, but they have been very good in convincing some people that they are right. I mean, that this narrative that the Islamic Republic is the victim of, these two big powers, or let's say the big power or the big Satan, as they call in the US, and the little Satan that is Israel, they have been able to convince people that this is the case. And I think that's one of the problems that we have in Latin America. Among journalists, among intellectuals, among university professors, they tend to buy this narrative and they repeat this narrative over and over. And this is the result of years of propaganda. But there is another thing that is very important. For many people, even though the revolution in Iran became, a fundamentalist, religious-based Shia revolution, they saw in Iran some kind of drive for change that the West was kind of losing. And for many people, both in the left, the extreme left, but also on the extreme right, they saw this kind of reemergence of a revolutionary power as a hope for similar events taking place elsewhere and even in Latin America. And I think that soft power is something that we cannot minimize, because it's influencing the way people or some people understand this conflict, particularly in Latin America. Thank you.
Isaac, I see I have a direct follow-up question here that goes to you. Like, we have one person asking, as President Sheinbaum, president from Mexico, has Jewish ascendancy, you think Mexico has a moral obligation to support Israel in this conflict?
Well, I mean, the first thing that we should understand, even though she certainly, President Sheinbaum, has Jewish origins, I mean, she has a very pro-Palestinian position regarding the conflict between Israel and Hamas. And I see her more aligned with the typical aims of the left in relation of this conflict. And I don't see her supporting in any way Israel. On the contrary, I think she prefers to take a distance and kind of avoid any association with the conflict. And if she has to take an open position, she will always support I mean, those who are against Israel. I mean, it's very paradoxical, but we should understand her. I mean, she represents somewhat the left in Mexico, and she should, she should avoid any kind of contagion, if I may say, from this conflict. Because let's say that in a very hypothetical situation, President Sheinbaum decides to say something supporting Israel, whatever. I mean, the first thing people will say is that she's kind of an agent of Israel in Mexico, that she represents the interests of Zionism, whatever. And then that won't be good for her. Then I don't expect anything from President Sheinbaum. But the only thing that I expect from her is to support those who are against the existence of Israel.
These are really bad news. Then I have here another question that goes to Sergio. One user is doing some research on the sanction imposed against Iran. And the question is, have they had any significant impact so far? What have been the main advantage and disadvantage of the sanctions against Iran? Maybe, Sergio, you could tell a little bit more on this.
Yes, the impact is clear, because if you visit Iran, you can pay with your credit card, and there are a lot of restrictions, and the Iranian economy is affected by the sanctions. Exporting oil is a problem for Iran. Now they established a special relationship with China, and they are focusing all their force on China, but the sanctions affect. But we may analyze not only sanctions on Iran, sanctions on other countries, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, and if we understand the impact, the effect of sanctions, we can check that at the end, the same rulers are still ruling those countries. So economically affect, but in the case of Iran, the leader, the supreme leader, used these sanctions as an instrument to say his population, we cannot develop our economy, we cannot improve your life because of the sanctions. The United States, the European countries are responsible of the difficult situation within the country. So sanctions impact the economy, but at the end, they are not a useful instrument to undermine these regimes, because the regimes, or in this case, the Iranian regime, use sanctions as an element of victimism toward its society.
So if I understand you correct, you would argue that they have an impact economically, but they does not affect the stability of the regime.
Exactly.
So like then the follow-up question, of course, would be, so it is a good idea to have sanctions, or what do you think about this? So do we need still sanctions against Iran?
I continue with the answer? Or?
Yes.
Yes. From the United States, from Israel, and other countries, our priority today is to end with the Islamic Republic of Iran. So it is necessary to deploy other instruments, other actions, but economic sanctions are effective, but they have to be complemented with other activities. So military pressure, cyber control, propaganda or counter-propaganda, inciting people to see the real situation of the regime, to act against the regime. So this is the counter-propaganda, and it's very important, not only in Iran, in other countries, but in the case of Iran, it will be a perfect complement for sanctions.
I see I have one more question that maybe goes to Marcel. So here a user is asking, we have seen also like in Syria a new regime or a change in the regime. So is there a chance to start again to have diplomatic relations with this regime? I'm not so sure if the question means Israel and Syria should have diplomatic relations, or the West and Syria, but maybe you could answer both of these questions.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, it's a very good question regarding Syria and Al-Shara. So there was in recent days there were reports of Syria maybe joining the Abraham Accords. I would be skeptical going that far already. The Washington has lifted the sanctions, or most sanctions on Syria in recent days. So I think there is an opportunity for some kind of rapprochement between Syria and Israel. Also, there was a report on the beginning of the week that Al-Shara met with the Israeli national security advisor Hanekbi, I think in the Emirates. I'm not sure if this meeting really happened, but it shows that there might be relations developing between both countries. What Syria wants definitely is that Israel moves, like, takes its troops back from Syrian soil. I don't think the deployment of Israeli troops on Mount Hermon will be, I think, a hot potato. But this is also something that Israel can, I think, or would be a way to go forward, to make compromises here. And so, yeah, I think there could be something developing between Israel and Syria, not like a full normalization of relations, but something a little less traumatic, I would say. And also, just one more thought. I think when it comes to the concessions regarding the Golan Heights, from an Israeli perspective, I think this would be a red line. I don't see any compromises in that regard currently. And just one last thought. I also think that Turkey plays a role here. They are heavily involved in with the new regime of al-Shara. So I think they would regard steps in regard to relations between Syria and Israel with tension. So this is also something one would have to keep an eye on.
Maybe a short follow-up question to you, Marcel, because like the idea from this whole discussion is to understand a little bit better if we see a fundamental transformation in the region's political landscape. How you would answer this question?
Not sure I understood the question. What do you mean?
The question is there like a fundamental change in the political landscape of the Middle East with this conflict, with the change in Syria, with the conflict in Gaza, also with the civil service?
I got it. Okay. So look, I think it's too soon to tell because there are so many moving parts right now, and all the dominoes haven't really fallen. So I think the situation is too fluid to really make out a new order. I think it's difficult to tell at the moment. We'll have to see how everything will work out in the medium run. What definitely changed is that Israel, I mean, it just displayed its superior military power just once more in a very impressive way. But it's still bogged down in a conflict with Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and this conflict affects very much relations to every Arab country in the region. So I think developments on the ground have to take place there until the region can move forward.
Okay, I think this is a fair answer. I have to make a little bit ping pong because I see I have one more question going to Sergio, and this is a really specific question on the sanctions, asking on the role of the UK, what measures the UK and also the European Union have taken against Iran.
Okay, actually, the UK is not part of the European Union since 2016 after the referendum, but in security measures in defense initiative, the United Kingdom is aligned with the European Union and with the United States, even with the problems within the NATO, but they establish a strong alliance. So in this regard, there are not many differences between the position of the United Kingdom and the rest of the European countries. There are divisions within the European Union. For example, the position of Germany is totally different from the position of Spain because of the government. But the general position of the bloc, we can understand that as a bloc is similar because Iran is a source of instability in the region. It's considered that Iran support, or not considered, it's a fact that Iran support proxy groups in Lebanon, in Yemen. These groups, Houthis in Yemen, are affecting trade in the Red Sea, so affect British interest, the rest of the European countries' interest, and the United States' interest, and the general position of the United Kingdom and the rest of the European countries is to undermine the current Iranian regime. So I think there are not many there are particularities, obviously, because each government is different and they defend their particular positions, but at the end, there is a general approach regarding Iran and the common ambition of undermining and maybe end with the present regime in Iran.
So thanks. I have a little bit the role of being the timekeeper, and I know this is a really big topic and there are a lot more questions. I also have like a long list of other questions. So still I have to interrupt here a little bit the discussion. So I want to give thanks once again to all three of you, to Marcel, to Isaac, to Serr. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your insights. I also would like to mention one more time, please, if you didn't read Diálogo Político now, start reading Diálogo Político. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on YouTube, on Instagram. I think it is worth. So have a good afternoon and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.